Where's the corner chair with the dunce at? Where's the corner chair with what? The dunce at. And I blame you.
I said you're liked.
Yeah, that's what I
told him.
He understands sign language. That's exactly what I'm thinking in my head to you. Why? Because I respect your opinion and your expertise. Now that I have to be here in his room. I have to be here. I'm sharing the love. Is there assigned seating?
Well, I know. I was kind of going over all that stuff with.
I should sit by the door so I have an easy access out.
You think you need to get out?
You never know.
They're sending somebody down there right now.
Are they? Thank you. I don't know who shut it off, but
Shut up.
So what happens is when they turn over the water, they automatically shut it off.
my daughter just bought a house. My wife's going over there to clean it tonight, and we get over there and there's no water. And the lady said we had to shut the valve off inside because there's a leak on the washer. So I turn it on and there's no water.
Yeah,
Because it has to be turned over to the new owners to pay the bill.
so the city goes out and they read it
Right.
so they can do the final billing on it.
Thank you.
Oh, we can pull, how are you? We can pull a desk over for you.
That'd be the first thing I'd be doing too, is my daughter something.
It's just,
I like Morgan's
I know
desk.
where
It's
we're
off in
gonna
the
go with
corner.
this.
Are you excited?
Out in the corner. Oh,
It's
she's in
fine.
the perfect location.
I want to do what I need.
The
to
best
do.
one is right
I
there.
think we're
Kind
gonna
of
move
door so you
forward.
can run.
Thank you.
Like
Yes,
go-
let's get this done.
Yeah. I can give you this one.
Thank you.
Think about
I
now.
don't think so.
What, you want to eat cream puffs?
No,
Craving
no,
one for
no.
like a few weeks
Okay, I'm done
now.
with that.
The only place I know that sells them is Costco, and it's like a huge bin.
Yeah, and then in the freezer, but you
Yeah.
can just defrost a few at a time.
I'm homeless right now. I don't have a freezer.
We're sitting
Oh,
this
how
far
come you're
apart.
homeless?
We're selling our house, so we have to be out in 2 weeks, and my husband and I are gonna build, so we're gonna live in our fifth wheel for a year. So
Where are you
I'm
building?
homeless, but
Nice and cozy.
very cozy.
So where are you building?
Syracuse,
Oh, okay.
hopefully, if we can get the lot.
Is that where you live now?
No, we live in North Ogden.
Oh, boy, so complete.
The development cost.
Called Legend Point. So it's right, well, not right, but it's off of 4,000. in between Glen Eagle and Schneider's Bluff. Like a little stretch there.
It's not, the city shut it off. They're on their way over to turn it on.
So we'll
Yeah.
see if we can get, if we have to hopefully get the lot. There's,
Yep.
Where's your camera?
They, I'm at the city council meeting, but
Here?
those are some things that you should have got.
Oh, I
on this.
see
You
it.
put your name, your
I
electricity.
didn't know where it
shut off
was.
in
I
any
was sitting there
moment.
thinking, where's your camera?
Did you see the last email?
Yeah, she should have given that to you a couple days ago so they could have it turned on.
lower to the right point. We had a bidding war.
Yeah, I got a call coming in, but they're sending somebody down there to turn it on, so. All right. no. Hey, Mark. Oh, that's all right. Uh-huh.
You gotta be like, be out in 3 weeks, cause yeah, as soon as it's under contract, it goes through quick.
Hi, Brian.
Oh, yeah,
So well, how are you?
I'm good.
Well, we know that, but how are you?
I was going the second way.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Yep. It's prior damage. Mhm.
So,
Just one of these. I don't care where you choose.
Yep, definitely. All right, thanks, Mark. Have a good one. See you, bye.
And that tells me that by rule, we don't have to wear our masks if we're staying social distance. So maybe when we get
really?
seated, we'll be a little bit less.
okay. There's some extra.
I caught it.
Yeah, I said, I
Okay.
just said a man.
It's universal sign language.
Yeah.
That's the universal language of life.
Well, on my mission, that's what they point with.
Well, first time I ever went to the Fort Lauderdale mission. We were talking about all the accents we're having down there. And the mission president says it's from the Cuban finger. And I'm like, what do you mean the Cuban finger?
No.
He had to explain it. He says there's so many Cubans that live in Fort Lauderdale and Miami that they don't use their turn signal. They roll the window down and they point, and that's where they're going. And so if you're not watching for them to stick their arm out the window to point where they're going, they'll just zip right over in front of you. They call it the Cuban finger down there. I thought, that's not what I was thinking, but I'm glad he explained it.
I think we should start. So,
Yeah.
do I just need to say who else here?
I saw that, not a roll call. Hello. So good to
What's
see
the
you.
I'm on sign?
It's so long, huh?
I'm on it.
It's terrible. My back's towards the audience.
Okay, so thanks so much. I guess I'm the mayor pro tem. Is that what it's called? And I anticipate that this is going to be a really good meeting. I'm excited about it. Thanks so much for being willing to come in tonight and do it so quickly. Just for the record, the people that are present are myself, Jan Burrell, Brian Saxton, councilman or councilperson, Ann Jackson, councilperson, Diane Wilson, and Councilman Joe Paul. We also have with us here for consulting purposes, Randy Sant, Steve Parkinson, and Glenda Moore. And we have our city planner, our city manager, Matt, Andrews, and Morgan, they are the people behind the curtain doing the wizardly things. So we appreciate that. So thank you and welcome. Just really quickly, as I thought about this meeting, and I'm going to take about 2 minutes on this and then we're going to get started. But the items for discussion were economic and commercial development. And then the setback, because that was one of the items that we said we would discuss during this time, and also the building height. And those are the only 3 things that we're going to speak with. So the meeting guidelines, I hope we can stick with these guidelines just for all of us, is to stick with the specific discussion items. So it's really easy for me to get off topic, and we're going to try not to do that tonight. Assume that everyone is attending the session with good intent. And I think that's just the way that we treat each other and how we can build really a commonality between us. We want to respect each other's time. So the meeting will last a maximum of 1 hour. I find that after 1 hour, none of us are productive. That's been evident for a long time. And so if we need to, we'll reconvene. We'll figure out, we'll take the last 5 minutes and decide when our next meeting will be if we need to. But that's only if we need to. I'm hoping that that will not be as necessary. We'll limit our comments each to 2 to 3 minutes. If we need to come back to you, then we'll circle around and keep coming back. If you have another comment, let me know that you're ready for another comment, but limit that one to 2 to 3 minutes too. We're going to have no filibustering, right? Because that doesn't seem to be too productive in our upper government. So we're going to try to avoid that. No interruptions. Be fully present. In other words, no side conversations going on, either electronically or with each other. We're going to be fully present. And then the next part is that we'll represent all citizens, business owners, or developers. So we know that we can do that by the information that we have and not be specific. And we're going to avoid mention of specific citizens, specific businesses, and/or developers by name. So the last 2 are just be willing to compromise, seek first to understand, and then to be understood. So in other words, let's listen to each other. during this meeting before we get our comments ready. And then be willing to genuinely agree to disagree if we have to. We're just gonna have to say, you know, we're gonna have come at this from different points of view, and if we have to disagree, that's okay, but we still like each other. So that's kind of how I hope the meeting will go. And that's a 3-minute discourse. Any comments on that? Any guidelines you want to add to that? And this is going to be primarily a discussion amongst the council. And then if we have to ask for consultation, we'll ask Steve for questions we have. We'll ask Randy for questions we have. If we need to ask Andy, I believe that he is on. Oh, okay. So if we have questions for him, we'll shoot those out too. So anything else we need to know? If you have questions for Matt, I'm going to sit down. I'm not going to stand this whole time. So I hope to just, I hope to be part of the conversation, and that is all. So I don't know exactly where to start other than to say we saw a really nice presentation from our survey that was done, and that gave us a lot of information. And again, we can go back and say, but that was only information from 800 of our citizens. But as we look at the margin of error, it could be from our whole city with 3% differences. That's what the statistical analysis tells us. So we'll just go with the idea that it does represent our whole city, with the idea in mind that it might be 3% off, but it shouldn't be more than that according to statistics. So I guess we can start with the idea that the first thing they asked for was economic and commercial development. Is that something we can agree on? Conversation on that.
Well, I'll just jump in. As you mentioned, economic development was a very important topic. In fact, when it was first presented to me, the whole idea, that was my understanding, was the #1 goal of the project. 82% on the survey. If you look at page 5 in here, you know, they of our citizens really felt that that was the priority. Y2 said the citizens voiced destination commercial as their priority for them. We know that destination commercial is unlikely in ground floor commercial. We know that residential is more lucrative than commercial right now. There are concerns with the general trend towards decreasing commercial. However, I've had an opportunity to speak with some experts that are saying the pandemic is actually causing kind of a pent-up commercial desire of customers and is causing a rebound of commercial, and that even, and maybe even especially of destination commercial, although it will look different, the demand is looking actually quite promising for them. Some citizens have suggested retaining core A and B as a commercial only, leaving the general zone with plenty of room for mixed use, and then still having the ground floor commercial opportunities. I think one of the key things is that we need market studies to help us know where and what type of businesses will be appropriate for our area, so that the discussion and the decision is data-driven, but not developer-driven, not emotionally driven. And other cities quote, the commercial spots are sacred, get the data. I had an opportunity to have quite a conversation with the developer and owner of the Clearfield Junction in Mr. Gilliland. That's the area that is across from City Hall in Clearfield on Main Street there. We have a lot of citizens that say they don't want that fill, and so I wanted to see what was happening there. He is also a developer of projects in other states. And part of his conversation said, just remember, ground floor commercial does not attract destination. You must have parking, and we can talk about that a little bit later, but he said you must have parking for ground floor and destination commercial to be successful. He said the #1 worst problem for his project there is the parking. He said, this is not New York City or even Salt Lake City, and he kind of felt Utah probably didn't even meet in the realm. Upper story residential is not enough to support ground floor commercial. You need traveling customers, and people won't park in the back and walked to the front to support the retail there. He said, don't push the building to the road. He has lost lots of retail because parking is too inconvenient and can't keep enough customer base to support the retail. I spoke with some other developers and they were saying the best spots in Salt Lake City even can't keep businesses when parking is limited. So, I mean, that's kind of a side part, but a very important part of economic development. And so I just recommend that we obtain those further market studies so we truly can meet the #1 goal of economic development, as well as increasing revenue and sprucing up downtown, because that's important. And it also meets the needs of citizens and property owners, I think, in a very nice balance. So that's where I'm coming at from economic development for myself, as I've talked to a bunch of citizens as well.
I'd like to address a couple of things that probably deal with economic development and with building height. I think there's this misconception that we're going to line 1900 with total mixed-use developments and total 80-foot high buildings. I've heard a lot of residents say, we don't want to be a tunnel, you know, and we don't want everything to be mixed use with ground level commercial. Mixed use doesn't have to be ground level commercial and residents above it. It can be, there's different developers that have built where they have a tower of apartments and then they have commercial around it, parking in the middle. So there's different things that they can do. I look at downtown Ogden, you know, building height wise, they have the Ogden admin building. They've got a couple of high rises across the street from them. You don't drive down 19 or down Washington Boulevard and feel like you're in a tunnel. They have varying degrees of buildings, and that's what I see our downtown looking like. I really see probably 3 buildings that could hit a maximum height of 80 feet between Riverdale Road and 5700. One of them is probably a mixed-use development where you have ground level commercial with housing above it, wrapped around a parking structure. That's one. We know that there's a potential for one around Harmon's. Then there's a potential for an office building. Then there's a potential for a hotel. Well, I don't anticipate all 3 of those being jammed right next to each other to where you're having 3 80-foot buildings. They're going to be located at different spots. We've already we've had a hotel survey study done, and there was a developer that was interested in a hotel. And one of the places they talked about was south of 5600 up against the freeway. So you have freeway visibility. You see a lot of that. And so you have parking out in front and to the side, but you have a taller building that sets back. Same thing, if a developer around Harmon's wanted to do a mixed-use development, they're not going to put it out on the front of the street. They've already got businesses out there to support that. You'd have parking in the middle and have a tower in the back with mixed use around it and underneath of it. And so when you talk about destination commercial, there's still plenty of room to put in restaurants, to do a movie theater, and to do those kind of things. We know big box retail is going away. I agree that with the pandemic, things are changing. We look right now, Newgate Mall is under public auction. I won't say what I think, but I would be surprised if Newgate Mall looks the way it does in 3 to 5 years from now because of market trends. And
Well,
so
we're seeing our big box.
strip malls are becoming more, strip malls and then integrated with some housing and things like that. I think there's this misconception that you're going to have 80-foot buildings on both sides of the street and it's all going to be mixed use. I totally don't see that, and I never saw that when this was being proposed. And so I want to make sure people understand that I don't ever see this being a tunnel, and I don't see the whole line, the street line, both sides with mixed use development.
The other piece, Joe, that to me is important to take a look at, and again, just from the survey, they want change. And if we do what we've always done, we're going to get what we've always got. We've got to move in some direction. And what they're telling us is that direction is economic development. So we have to, in some way, attract those developers, because I can't make economic development just happen. I have said, some of us have worked really, really hard on trying to attract business, but we can't unless we at least compromise on some level with them, with the developers who have the funding and the ability to do that. And so what they're telling us is they would like some sort of ability to mix that. Is that my understanding? So to mix commercial with the ability to do what allows them to make money. Am I correct on that, Mr. Sant? Okay, so in order to do that, you know, we've got to look at a different way of seeing things, in my mind, than what we've been looking at.
Right.
Because for 20 years, we've looked the same, and Roy has
Right.
taken a decline during that time. So we've got to look at a different approach rather than saying, well, this is what I want. I use the same analogy all the time. I say what our citizens want is they want to win the lottery, but they can't win the lottery unless they buy a ticket. And so we're going to have to buy a ticket here. We're going to have to do something in order to win.
Yeah,
And
and-
do something is to make a change.
And you're right, and that downtown corridor has been zoned commercial for as long as I've lived in Roy, and I don't see it growing. Something's got to change. We've got to spark the want for people to come here, and part of what people are wanting is mixed use. And like I said, mixed use has varying looks. I think there's this idea that mixed use is a tall building with housing and ground level. That's only part of mixed use. You go look at some of the big developments, and they're big plazas, they're walkable areas to where you've got a mix of different stuff. And that's my vision for that down there.
Well, and, you know, as Diane alluded to, the parking, at least our residents say currently parking is not a problem. And even if we were to put in some structural changes, I don't foresee parking becoming our first problem. They're not saying that. Would you agree with that, Steve?
Well,
Yeah.
you know,
All developers don't want a lack of parking. They want, I mean, like Diane said, if you have a lack of parking, it detracts from their project.
I just feel that going over this, we just need to make a decision. I just feel that the document is to give the property owners the choice what to do with their property. That's what this whole chapter 13 is about. I think first impression, you get off this freeway, and I've talked to a lot of people in this city, old and young, with the exception of Joe's daughter just buying a house. Mine are the only two children in this council that I have children that live in Roy, that will die in Roy. They're now with housing, they're never gonna be able to afford to move. And it's like, if you're not developing, you're dying. We need small businesses that complement the city. You know, my son was telling me about ghost kitchens. That's the wave of the future. People aren't building restaurants. People do Uber Eats and DoorDash. And, you know, if you could get something like that in Roy, or your Grubhub, and it said, or shipping, you know, or even a station where you can plug in your car, because that's, all the cars are going to go electric. And if Roy could get one of those, people usually take the exit, usually to go to the bathroom, maybe drive up and down 1900. They don't know we have Lower Roy. People that are just taking the freeway, just, you know, just to go to the bathroom, maybe grab a hamburger at McDonald's. They don't know we have this nice area down there. They're driving along 1900 and it's not looking real great. And they're like, ugh, it's not our job as a council to develop this land. It is our job to create an environment where businesses want to come to Roy and have sustainable and viable businesses to promote a good community. And 1900 is the first thing they see, and it's not a great impression. I just want to know Diane, what is your favorite part of 1900 as you see it now that you can't live without?
So I don't believe that has anything to do with it. And I believe that what we need to do is have data to know where destination commercial could go. I'm not saying not to have mixed use at all. I am believing, I know that there is data. I've talked with people that say they can do studies and that fact they can actually say, if in this area, there are stores because of your demographics and because of the new money that's coming in from Northrop Grumman and
Right.
stuff like that, they say that we can identify this area and that you could save as commercial only, and then the rest could be there to support it. I'm not saying I love it just exactly the way it is, but I am saying we need to respect the citizens who don't want that. And if you want, I've done some pictures, if you guys
I want to
want to just pass
respectfully
them.
ask you a question too.
Uh-huh.
So if you want this data, we've had this document for a year. Why all of a sudden, I personally see it as a delay tactic. If you wanted data, why didn't you ask for data a year ago? Why didn't you ask for
In
data 6
November,
months
because I
ago?
didn't know it was available till November, and I did ask for it in November, and we were trying
We
to do
started
it
working on this
funding.
a year ago.
But
November
did
was
I
only
say I
several
didn't?
months ago.
I didn't know it was available. You asked me the question. I said, I didn't know it was even available until November. I tried to get funding for it in-house, but when we talked about it in-house, we thought we could maybe get the information in-house. So then it was found that we couldn't get the information in-house. So I don't know if you're interested in this, you can pass on. And so that's the answer to my question. The question is not to have mixed use. I do believe Heights part of it, but I
Right.
believe what we need to do is we need to be very careful about our commercial, because there are many city people and from other cities that are saying commercial is so limited. If you can get a data to know exactly where it's very viable, then you can feel comfortable. You can say, I don't have to worry about a mixed use development with residential anymore. I can feel very comfortable in allowing this and that, because that is what the key is. I think that we didn't have all the data that we probably needed. And
I
and
just
so
don't.
that's my
Right.
answer. It's not that I
Right.
love it the way it
Right,
is.
Right.
I just think we've got to preserve. We have commercial, destination commercial, there's not very much of it coming around, and we need to
Yeah.
preserve. We just got to preserve a little bit
I
of
just don't
space.
see I just don't see people building anything big anymore. I
So
just
my
think
question
that-
is, how do you attract that commercial?
And so that's where we can get some information, and they have data. There are several studies that's called, they call them the retail mapping and stuff like that.
So my question would be, if we were to adopt chapter 13, just if we were,
Uh-huh.
would it limit the ability to have destination
not limit.
commercial?
But you have to remember, if you don't have it in, you can't plan for a potential you haven't, if it's not in the code. And, and I'd asked Joe this last meeting was, if you don't, if it doesn't say in the code, you can't have 80 foot against the road, I'm sorry, it can be there. So you have to plan for it. I'm just saying, let's plan for those contingencies the best we can.
But what if, okay, I'm just doing the what ifs.
Sure.
What if we said, let's move forward. Let's get something going, something different, because we need to move forward.
Yes.
I mean, our citizens have
agree.
told us we've got to move forward. So what if we took as much as we can of the current document and move forward and say, there's little things that we said we needed to work on, the setback, the building height. But let's take the document as is and then say, now let's move forward with maybe some studies. I mean, we've talked to Y2 Analytics. They're anxious to do more studies for us and say, are there areas that we want to make commercial only? That could happen maybe in the next year, maybe in the next 2 years, but we already would have something to move forward from.
Right.
Rather than saying, let's put the skids on until we have all of that information. That's my thought.
And I agree with that, because if you look at what's going on in Riverdale right now, Riverdale's on fire. Some of the businesses that we've tried to attract to Roy are now building in Riverdale. Won't mention names, but you've got restaurants going to Riverdale. You've got commercial stores going to Riverdale that we were originally attracting as this city, but they went there because they have more to offer. We don't have nothing to offer on 1900 right now,
So,
because if we did, they'd already be coming. Nobody's coming to Roy. We already have 60-foot buildings. We already have commercial areas, and we're attracting very few right now. We've got some good businesses that have come in, but they're not coming at the rate of growth that we need to sustain the city.
And it will be like small businesses. See, I see, apartments up for those people that are gonna work up at Hillfield, riding their bike to work and then having a sandwich shop underneath it, or a cleaners, or, I mean,
Absolutely.
and it will take a while, probably, I'm sure,
That's
for
gonna
those
take a
built.
long time,
Yes,
but we,
That's
but-
not prohibiting it all.
No, yeah, and if
Right.
people are living there, and I seriously don't have a problem with a hotel against the freeway that's 80 feet tall, but nothing's been proposed to even do that. Somebody might want something 60 feet tall, but it's not gonna block any, I mean, it's better than what you see off the freeway now of old torn down buildings and stuff. And I think a hotel with all the people that would be coming to Northrop Grumman, it would fill it. It would give our high school somewhere to have, meetings. Even when we had our police get together, we had to go to a hotel down in, a place down in Ogden, because we don't have anything like that. I think, but we don't even have a developer that's even approached us, as far as I know, to build that, but we got to get this passed. So, they can use newer materials to build their hotels but so if we said, okay, 60 feet high with a 20-foot, variance, maybe would that be something that maybe we could do and just get it passed so that we can start attracting business and not miss the boat of everything that's going on up at Hillfield. We're stuck. Everybody I went to school with, all my daughter's friends, everybody's like, when are you going to do something about 1900? It just is so.
again, I think we have to make some changes to the attraction.
Right.
Not changes to the feel necessary. The developers will make that. The
Right.
business owners, maybe our current business owners will make those changes. But we have to change the attractability is what, to me, we need to change it. And we do that by changing our codes.
And
Is that correct?
I believe we actually have some great opportunity here. I just believe that we're missing a window. And if getting the studies in the future allows us, and we're willing to take that data and maybe make changes in the future,
Right.
just be accepting. I'm fine with that because, this is a process. I'm sorry that you would even consider, Joe, that I'm delaying or grandstanding because this is education. If I only
That's just
learn
my
about it-
personal opinion.
I mean,
You take it
if
for
you
what
learn
it's worth.
about it, November 5th, that's when I had found about it and I talked about it. But we had talked about trying to do it in-house. That wouldn't work. But maybe the next thing really is to discuss height, because height's a big part of this.
Right.
That's something we can move forward. What if we start with height and go from there? And
So what our people told us was that height was an issue for them. And 66%, is that right? Told us that
72.
72%. And I went down because I thought, what about the 3% margin of error? So 72 down to 68
you want one of these?
68.
said that our maximum should be 60 feet. I want to stick with feet. Is that okay, Steve?
Yeah, I go. by
Stories, I think, get us in all kinds of troubles. I was thinking about stories the other day, and I was thinking about Harmon's is 40 feet high or about,
Just
right?
take a look. We were able to get that measured. I've got some measurements here. It's 31 feet.
See, we
Okay,
thought it was
well,
40.
Well, let's say 30,
30.
Okay.
but it is one story.
Right.
So if we said 3 stories, it could be 90 feet. Whatever the actual height is. So I think we should stick with heights rather than stories. Now you can put in there, however Steve does his magic, he can put in there that might address 6 stories, 60 feet might address 6 stories if you want to make your stories short. But it might not. It might be 3 stories with 60 feet.
Well, 60 plus a variance of possible 20, and maybe you look at what's the conditional for the additional 20
I
setback.
think
That
that-
it can't be right on 1900, that it is setback or.
So to
or
me, we
various
leave
things.
those very vague if we can, the variance things. I think we talk about location as one possibility. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, if you remember, the ordinance already talks about setbacks and stuff like that, not just for the whole building, but stepping back. You can't be vague if you're going conditional. It has to be specific and to the point, because vagueness will get you a lawsuit.
Can we, I guess vague is a wrong word, but can we say it depends on where you're asking for the variance? If it's to the backside of, if it's way off 1900, I frankly don't care. So that to me is being vague by saying the location is.
But the issue is, and the state's come down on it, and half the reason why our ordinance was changed in 2017 on conditional uses and took that away from the council is the councils are vague. They think that they can do, and I'm not saying you guys, but councils in general think they can just ask for anything they want. Well, the state says, no, you do that, you're up for a lawsuit, because what you think is one thing, they're thinking another. Developers need to have concise, precise things. So when they walk in, they know exactly what you want. So if it is in the back, stayed in the back.
So say off 1900.
Right.
Well,
Well,
those are
if
things
that's
you
what
have
we
to,
want.
I mean, if that's what you want, but one thing you need to remember, if you take a look at the pictures, people say they liked Ogden Junction. So the bottom one is Ogden Junction. That's like 42 feet high. Now they've got some stuff that steps back across from that, but we're talking about for the general feel of it. And if you take a look at the top one, that is Clearfield Junction. That is 46 foot high with that 4-foot parapet. And they don't like that. And I had an opportunity, as I mentioned, to
like that
speak with
either.
that owner.
Yeah, and that's the one
And
that's-
so,
right.
and
Yeah,
it's,
ugly.
it may or may not be design, but we need to talk
Right.
about, it's the feeling that they're
Yeah.
talking about. And let me just mention a couple of things. The owner, he's very involved in that. He was just saying that the ground floor commercial is a drain on any development project. And so you have to be able to make up the difference, because it's hard to do that. And one of the things he said is that you can have 2 stories above, but that won't really cover unrented commercial space. He said 3 stories of residential above will cover unrented commercial costs, like if your ground floor
So
isn't
he's got
rented.
3 stories,
He's
right?
got 3 stories. He said, so that when he can't rent commercial bottom at all, 3 stories will still cover that. He said, if you had 4 stories, well, that'd be great. That'd be like gravy or, icing on the cake. And so if we take a look at those numbers, say if you go 1 more story, even for the icing and the gravy, that's going to be around 56 feet. And so we know that 72% of our people want 60 foot or less. Half of that want 40 or less. As you mentioned, Jan, height is very important. And so I believe that the property owners still are getting a nice balance. They're getting an opportunity that they didn't have. When they bought commercial, they didn't have this opportunity. That mixed use gives them opportunity. But if we do 60 foot or less, then we're giving a nice respect of our citizens who really want less. My concern with the 80-foot variance is, how do we keep it consistent, kind of like Steve says? And then in reality, if you put 80-foot variance, it really isn't a compromise. It turns into being, well, you can get 80 foot, but it just might take the developer a little bit longer to mix and match and do this sort of thing. So I believe the benefit can be there if we have 60 foot max, and they don't need the extra gravy for 80 foot. It would keep our citizens happier.
But there are all the
me-
citizens I've talked to said an 80-foot hotel against the freeway. Who cares?
Well,
Yeah,
look at
the
the
survey
survey.
doesn't
Look at the
address
survey.
where it's at. That's
It
my
doesn't- that's the
concern.
problem.
It doesn't-
Because if
doesn't.
people are thinking, I'm gonna see it from my backyard,
Right.
or it's right next to my back property, we already heard from people that they were concerned that the junior high is right against their property and it's taller,
Right.
where previously it used to be back. Well, I have not heard a complaint about IHC building.
Right.
That's a sizable building right next to
What's
people's
the height
property.
on that, Steve?
39.5 feet.
So
IHC
40
is-
feet.
So that's
But it's
40
also closer and doesn't have the stepping requirements as our ordinance would require.
Which the new one has stepping. And so I never anticipate an 80-foot building right against 1900. I anticipate it
Against the freeway.
back up farther.
So how do we write that, Steve, so we can have, this is like a strip. You can only have a little strip of 80 foot against the freeway. How do we write that?
No idea.
You have to have a developer that wants to build it first.
And it's gonna take,
Well,
And in
except we
order,
have- except we
right,
have
and
to
then,
have it written.
could we
and then
say-
in order to have it,
What if you said setback from,
If you said the setback
Well, I
has to
mean,
be,
It'd be
does that create a new zone?
caveat, conditional use, standard, X number of feet away from 1900 West would probably be the most clearest.
And that would be acceptable.
Well, again, it's something that's, if Glenda reads it, I read it, it's all the same. If I say it's 20 feet from, the back door of Joe's house, it's not really clear. It's got to be a certain standard that,
So does it almost create a new zone?
no.
No, it can just say the set.
It'd just be a caveat in one of the tables on,
40 feet.
if you do the downtown east is the only place that 80 foot can be.
nobody's
And
done
then
it.
it's just a caveat, little star next to the height that 60 feet or 80 feet, and then they drop down in the notes and it would state what the requirements are to gain the 80 feet.
So the Harmons is 300 feet back. For instance, that's 300 foot back.
So would that be acceptable if we went with
You gotta
that?
be careful, 300 feet, when you get down to like where Dr. John's is at. I don't know if you can go 300 feet and still get a hotel in there.
Right.
But then that would be, then it means it's that far away from 1900 and it's not on 1900 then.
Yeah, because
You
it would
can't
be the
get-
parking up front,
Yeah,
like
you
the
can't-
drive-through, you check in, and then the hotel would just be right up
I wonder,
against.
any way to know what the
So
depth of the
that
lot
means you're
is,
not getting
Right.
300
Dr.
foot
John's?
back.
At the moment, no.
Then you're preventing that feel that the
I'd have to go get
citizens
my
don't want. They
computer.
don't want that. They don't.
I think
40
they'd rather
foot,
have
they're
that than
okay.
what's there.
Well, they're okay with 40 foot. Most of the people are okay with 40 foot.
I'd be okay with
Quite
an
a few
80-foot
people
hotel and not Dr. John's
Are
building.
60 foot. But
That
when it
whole area
comes,
right there is just.
but you
So,
know,
so let's talk about how far back would be okay. That's the setback, right? That still sticks with our,
Is there any way to find out the depth of the lot of Dr.
That's,
John's?
that's what he's working on.
Okay.
But, to me, setback in the Harmons area is very different than setback in the area where the state liquor store is or Dr. John's was. So,
that
Because
still is
it-
the feel. It's still the feeling along, as you drive along 1900, whatever that setback is going to let the people know what that feeling is. So
I
if
agree.
you only have 20 foot,
But having said that, the setback at the Harmons area is way excessive in my mind. Because, then we come around that corner, it's a very different feel than up on that end. I think the setback could be much less than it currently is. So to me, the setback needs to allow for a building, but it needs to stay off 1900. But it doesn't have to be 300 feet.
well, that's a good point. May I just comment on that then, Jan? Because Mr. Gilliland said the number one, the absolute worst problem for that project is having it too close to the road. He said that you cannot it will not support retail because there isn't enough residential mixed use. And that's if you took this whole huge area to support that with walking, and people won't go around the back to park. He said that if he could have a little parking strip in front, he could have his retail filled. That because he said he keeps losing retail after retail because he doesn't have enough cost customers that will be, because we need people that travel to support those businesses, and then they won't take the time to go around the back to park. So you've got a really good point. And right now we don't have parking allowed next to the road. We have.
The one mixed-use
We have-
development I looked at Harmon's that was a potential mock-up, it showed Harmon's wrapped with the mixed-use development. So the setback would be back as far as Harmon's, taking off each side and going around and going up. So there you would have the ability to have that big setback, but farther south, you wouldn't have that ability.
Nobody has.
But maybe you do,
Nobody
Maybe-
has to have that big.
yeah,
in my
so maybe
mind.
you have 2 stories up front and then it goes back and then it goes up. So you don't have the tunnel fill. I think part of that's in the ordinance, isn't it?
Not for core A, I don't believe. I think that's only when it's across, next to houses, right, Steve? I think, You don't have the
step.
stepping back unless it's by houses, right?
Stepping is required for the house.
But not on core A,
Because Core A was never against,
right?
Residential.
It's only the area that's against the houses.
But that could also be for core 8 if we're trying to avoid that tunnel fee.
just so everybody knows, Arby's is 200 feet deep. Property that Arby's sits on.
The Arby's sits on?
Mhm.
Oh,
And what about the Dr. John's?
and Rancherito
Can you tell us
down
what,
there.
That is?
One thing at a time.
Sorry about that. Well, I
But
should've
what
brought that
about
map. I had that
like
map.
the study that they did, the hotel study in 2019 that we paid for?
Well, that's 60 foot. They can still do 60 foot.
Because that required, the 2.2 acres for the parking of, 150 vehicles and, I mean, that whole study is outlined here.
Uh-huh. Yep.
So let's go back to what we're really talking about, though, the building height.
Uh-huh.
Dr. John's and that is 327 feet.
So you couldn't do a 300 setback there.
Well, I think a 300 setback is way excessive in my mind.
I agree.
I
agree.
think
I do
for
too.
80 foot,
Did you say
Yeah.
Arby's was 200 feet from that?
I
to the
do.
back of the
That,
building?
in my mind,
property.
no matter how, 300 setback, that's saying you can't
Because
do
then it's the
anything
Drive-in.
for 300 feet.
Oh, no, that would only be 80. You can still do 60 foot. You can still have 60 foot all the way.
Right, but Diane, if you want to put an 80 foot, even 300, you don't want 300 feet of nothing. You're gonna have 300 feet of blighted area to do an 80-foot building at the back.
No, you wouldn't have to. You could still do lots of stuff. You're just saying that the 80-foot part is 300 foot away. You can still have 60 foot all the way up to whatever your setback is.
But what if they want to build an 80-foot building?
Yeah.
Where
I'm saying
Dr.
that's-
John,
well, it's
where
just like
Dr.
Dr.
John.
John's
Well,
is at.
Well, so then you could have 200 foot back and it's like what Joe was saying, you could have it stepped. You could have stepped and that would be an option.
I stopped the other day, I was in Lehigh and I stopped and they built a new, I think it's called a True Blue Hotel. And it's a 5-story hotel. But the first story is 20 feet. So, I mean, that building is over 60 feet and it's not that tall. To look at it with what's surrounding it, you have one building and then the rest is only a couple of stories. But if we limited it to 60 feet, you couldn't put that.
So to me, what do you think is an appropriate setback?
For 80 foot. I think that if you, at least 200 foot would be, if you think of Arby's, if Arby's, right behind 80 foot behind Arby's could be 80 foot.
The only place you could do that is at Harmon's, because as you go down, the train track comes in and then the freeway comes in. I really, from what I've talked to developers, where I anticipate the hotel and an office building is south of 5,600.
So how far could the setback be?
City planner?
Well, I'm sorry, what was the
Well,
question?
between you two, because you understand buildings and you understand setbacks. If you looked at the corridor 5,600 to 5,700 for a potential hotel and office building,
Or even 56 to 6,000? Let's look there. Let's look at
what,
bigger.
what's a
space.
feasible setback to still be able to accomplish a building?
Well, it starts getting narrow and narrower as you
I know.
go, so
maybe do 56
Dr.
or
John's
57
is
foot.
327 and
You get
we
down
were
in
stopping
here.
right at Les Schwab, right?
Yeah, we stopped at 5,700. That's why I said 56 to 57.
So the property north of Les Schwab. What was it?
I mean, I was thinking 100-foot setback, that still leaves you a 200-foot building. But can parking be in the setback? So the building,
No.
Not the way it's written.
okay, so that's where you'd have to change it is parking can be in the
The
setback.
property, it doesn't say.
Yeah, but you may have a situation where somebody might want to put the building up front, and put the parking behind.
We don't want to do that though.
Yeah, I know, but that's what I was saying is,
There's a lot of businesses that have it that way.
There are, but what our
We used to want
citizens
an
have told us
80-foot
is they
building
don't
on
want the
1900.
building up
That's-
against 1900.
That's right.
So I'm thinking, maybe you have a restaurant pad out front and then parking and then the hotel.
That'd be
The
nice.
parcels next to Les Schwab won't do that. You won't be able to have, you won't have space.
You wouldn't get any development from 5,700 to 6,000 if you did that.
The 80 foot
But
development, you would
core
have-
A or east side is only to 5,700.
No, it goes all the way down to the property north of Les Schwab.
Goes down to Les Schwab.
What's the address of Les Schwab?
5832 or something like that.
So north of there, you could do a bigger setback.
Well, it's less than, it doesn't say because it's meets and bounds and I'm not going to try to figure it all
I
out.
get
And the plat map doesn't show a distance just because it starts going like this and they don't do it. So I couldn't tell you. The description says about 249 feet.
So I think if you wrote it, you'd have to say what the setback is, but you could allow smaller buildings or parking in the setback.
Can we do that, Steve?
Smaller buildings and parking in the setback.
Uh-huh.
So if you said the buildings have to be 50 to 100 foot off of 1900, the big building, the tower, you could have smaller buildings and parking up.
Well, I guess again, it's, the ordinance was written to a particular document that wanted everything up front. Ordinance isn't set up necessarily, we'll have to rewrite the entire thing, basically, if we're wanting now say parking's in front of the building
We're just thinking
and not on
core,
the side and
core
rear.
A, east side.
Well,
Yeah.
again, it's all the same. I mean, why would the west side be any different?
Well, because we're looking for a variance for an 80-foot building.
And we know
I'm
our
just saying,
citizens
it's just-
don't want, we know our citizens don't want that, so we're trying to work. We want them to still be happy when they drive into Roy, drive home to Roy.
I don't know.
So if we just pretend that pretend we're gonna rewrite it some way, what would be a reasonable number then? What would be a reasonable number? to
Reasonable
do that?
number for setback,
To be able, right, 150,
0 to
200?
10. Tell an 80-foot building. Is that what we're talking about setback wise?
An 80-foot variance. on
Well,
the building.
I don't like the word variance. That goes to the,
Conditional use.
that goes to the hearing officer, not you guys. Conditional use still goes to the planning commission, but we won't go there. To me, the way the focus, Roy, the way this document's all been written is building to the front.
Okay,
For
well,
me, a
that's
typical,
not what our survey said.
well, the survey,
And if you look at Focus Roy, they only want 2 to 3 stories, even if you do have a
yeah,
front.
but
they only
that
want-
document also said 5 to 6 in the front runner station, and I know you guys don't want that.
Right,
So let's, if we're gonna go semantics, let's do that
sounds good to me.
later, but it comes down to you. What my opinion is not what you guys will want.
Steve, what's the current setback in the current zone?
20 feet.
But I'm trying to figure out how to set back a tower building and still have parking in lower buildings up front.
Yeah, is that a possibility?
It is what you would like it to be.
I just don't know how you write that legally.
Well, that's something I'll have to figure out.
Yeah,
And you're
Randy?
brilliant, luckily.
Many of these developers, when they're developing these higher buildings, what they do is they put their parking in the core of the middle of the building so that the apartments or the whatever goes or wraps around them. And so your parking is inside for your development. So when you're looking at that individual development and you're looking at that individual thing, the parking is contained within that development. So they build whatever adequate parking they need, whether it be for commercial, for residential, whatever it ends to be, they build it inside there. So they don't need to have a lot, if you will, to park the cars on. It's all contained within a building.
Okay, so let's not talk about the parking then, but what our people have said is they don't like a tall building up against 1900.
So maybe that's just the wrong location. Maybe it's just gonna have to be.
So
on
if
the
we have a,
Olsen property or somewhere else, if somebody buys that.
if we have a setback of 20 feet for a 60-foot building, what if we added an additional 10 foot for 10 foot of height? So that'd give you a 40-foot setback for an 80-foot building.
Where are you putting that?
Well, so,
We're not putting it anywhere. We
No,
can't.
no,
no, but I think of 3 potential places. You're looking parallel with Harmon's, you're looking at the Dr. John's, Rancheritos, down to West Schwab. I think on that site, you're probably looking at an office building and a hotel, and you're probably looking at mixed-use housing, retail around Farmlands. Those are just the plans I've seen from several different developers.
To
I mean,
me,
there's been nothing drawn up for permanent.
right, to me, we gotta look at what our citizens want and say, but
Or
how can they get the development that they want within what they want the look to be? And the look is said, we don't want it right on 1900. Is that what I've heard? Is that what
They
you've
just don't
heard?
want
Joe?
a higher than 60-foot building.
That's a pretty big thing. People do not want the high.
Okay, so if they don't want it right up against, how can we do that within the code? That's all I'm asking is, I'm not saying, do I want it? Do I not want it? Do they want it? Do they not want it? I'm just saying, how can we do that?
Well,
And our
But
guy is,
Steve had to run to the restroom. He'll be right
okay.
back.
No bathroom breaks allowed. That wasn't on here.
You have to have 5 minutes after that. Nope, we can't.
Well, it sounds like-
Zoning, just like Joe was saying, you take that original setback and to get additional height, you just add 10 feet for 10 feet. That is a way.
although I'm not
But
sure that
I
they'll
don't
be
think they
happy,
have the depth there though.
not for some of.
Yeah.
it's,
Which sometimes that just makes
Comment?
the lots. not
well,
livable.
yeah, a comment. That way the little recorder knows I'm here. I meant the tape player. First of all, I don't know how we can, to go back. I don't know how we can create any kind of high-density project along 1900. I know that we've put a lot of time and effort into this. But the commercial property over by Harmon's, that's prime commercial property. And so
Vacant for how long?
well, but it's vacant, waiting, and one of the rules is we can't mention people or developers, so I won't. But it's been vacant and could have been tooled at the 60-foot level that is already available there.
But there wasn't mixed use available.
No, there wasn't. And that's where my rub is with this whole thing. All I get from people is, please put apartments, the high density housing somewhere else. And we throw things at them like, well, we need it because Northrop Grumman. The people at Northrop Grumman are going to be making 6 figures once they get out of the car. You think they're going to be the ones that stay in these apartments?
I truly do.
There's no,
They're a different class of people than you or I, Brian.
but they're not all singles.
Not all of them, but one of the citizens that sent a big email the other day about it. I spent a half an hour on the phone with him last night and explained to him in great detail how things could be. And he's like, man, when you explain it that way, it makes a lot more sense.
I think,
And so I get it. We're getting conversations from people, but are we taking the time to explain it to them, to help them understand? Maybe you haven't been able to because you were out of the hunt for several months, Brian. I don't know, but I think as council members, we have to know what the potentials are and then explain it to people. I've probably been able to dispel the majority of concerns by just talking to people like I have tonight.
I would agree with that, Joe. I think that it's not about putting any residential in that commercial area, in my mind. Because that's what our developers are saying they're willing to develop. If we can't get them to develop, we're not getting anywhere. We're not making any move.
I'm just asking a question. How does a matchbox type of development, how does that revitalize 1900 West? Who is gonna come?
Have you
Let's
went and
drive
looked at
down
any of these
1900
potential things you call
West.
matchbox developments? Because I've looked at a ton of them. I've driven to them, Brian. They are nice developments. Have you taken the time to drive to multiple developments and look at them? Holiday, I went to Idaho Falls, I went to Sugar House. We've walked them, we've seen them. To call them a matchbox, I think that's a degrade to the potential developer.
Well, I'm sorry, if they were here, I would say nice things to them.
Well, we haven't even seen
I
any
Maybe they're
plans.
listening.
Joe, can I just say that I have been to those places and I have driven them. And I've actually talked to the people from Northrop Grumman. And they would like a few, they said that their employees, they would like a few mixed use residential things. But they have a high percentage of their employees coming are more established and they would like some of the nicer suburbs that, and they gave examples of the nicer suburb places we have in Roy. So Brian has got a very good point. They'll use some, but there's a big percentage of what wants the
So
other.
do you think that our developers would develop more than they can fill?
No, but I'm just saying Northrop Grumman isn't going to be the point. In fact,
That's right.
for example,
be anybody
Clearfield,
living
this
in them.
Clearfield
Doesn't have to
Junction
just
area,
be-
he said the residential was all filled long before they even got started. And so they, that was long filled before they were still just barely starting the construction. So you're right, the residential is going to be filled. That's going to bring in the other concerns people have, the traffic, that they're going to do it because that's where the money is. That's where the cash cow is. And that's why it would be nice to know, we want them to be able to make a profit. It's their property, it's the development. That's why I wanted to know how high could it be to still make money and cover the empty commercial spaces that will probably be there. And so I had that one specific example, but I've checked other places and they were saying 3 stories will cover, 4 stories is like gravy. So we're pretty sure if things above that, that's even gravier, or that's the cherry on top. So if we can balance on their need to make money, because we want that, but balance the need of the citizens. We want property owners to have rights, but we still need to do it within, I called the state of Utah property ombudsman. And he says, you just got to be really careful and balance it as a reasonable request. And it's going to be a balance between the citizens and the property owners. And I think that's where the key is. When these property owners bought the land, they knew it was commercial. So if we could give them a bonus, maybe not everybody, but maybe some of them a bonus, that's great. But
I don't think we'll have everybody want a bonus. I think, like Joe said, I think that there's going to be a limited number because they're not going to build more than they can support.
But we have to realize that it could be all of it. So you have to take what we can do and what is allowed. That is really important. You have to realize what's allowed.
Okay, I promised that we wouldn't go an hour. We've gone an hour. Can we meet again?
So
I think we've got to, I think we've got to settle it outside of here. I don't want to go over an hour. I think it's the tempers move
is
too
there
high.
something we can ask for research or how to come up? Because I believe that I believe it's a
What
very
direction
strong
would you
for
want?
80 foot for, I mean, if Joe was talking about doing 80 foot, I just think that the step back, a 40 foot step back to 80 foot, I think will be very disappointing to our citizens. Maybe we can come up with ideas of another way to do the step back or something like that. I think his ideas of having the shorter buildings up front are a possibility, but I think if you get 80 foot, 40 foot away, that is still going to be very
I
disappointing.
just wish we had that in the document when we asked the survey, because most people just want to move forward, develop 1900, develop the city. And personally, if we surveyed them again, they might say they don't care that if, I mean.
So to me, I thought we agreed early on to say, let's adopt something. Let's move forward on something and then be able to adjust it. If we see, if we suddenly see, we did it with car washes. Would you agree with that? We didn't do it soon enough, but we did it. Because we suddenly saw,
we haven't adjusted it.
we did.
Because, well, we thought we did, but the door is opened for another one coming down.
Yeah, but you have to
No,
understand what
Steve,
that door
tell me
is.
I'm
open for.
wrong.
It's not a standalone car wash,
It's
and
on
it's
a
an
gas station.
accessory building.
Then we should have listed that, because we.
Why
got-
didn't you, Brian? You
I
had the
take-
opportunity too.
You know what? I take blame for that one, but you know what? I don't want to mess up.
Even our
twice.
city attorney couldn't anticipate that that was going to be a
So
problem.
can I ask a question back on the thing? What is wrong with giving 60 foot as a height for 4A? What's wrong with that? Because that would be a solution that the citizens would be happy with and would allow the developers a very nice amount of extra floor to cover the ground floor.
I think 60 foot is fine, except that we know that developers want more than that.
But do we give it all to the developers or do we do a balance between developers and citizens?
Well,
I
first
think
we
it
have
is
to
a
get
balance
this
if we
passed so we
call
can
it a
even get a
variance.
developer to want to come.
Well,
If I was a developer listening to us right now, there's no way in hell I'd come to the city. We got people insulting developers. We got people, it's just, once
Yeah,
again, we
and
walked
it-
out of a
it's not
meeting with no
Northrop
decision
Grumman
made.
that would totally move into those apartments. We're not saying,
I mean, my daughter just bought a house in Roy that she paid double what it was worth 3.5 years ago.
Yeah.
So when we talk about affordable housing, it's not low income housing. We don't have affordable housing in Roy. Mixed use provides affordable housing. It gives opportunity.
Actually, probably not, only unless it's subsidized. That's what the numbers are saying. If it's subsidized, you might get some of that in.
Okay, well, we haven't decided anything. You're right.
That's the status quo for this council.
well,
Joe, I thought we weren't gonna insult people.
Yeah.
Let's try to avoid that.
We've worked this to death and
Yeah,
we're,
Steve,
This-
comment.
On affordable housing. It goes to the age-old thing of supply and demand. If there's a large supply in there, housing does what? Goes down.
Does that,
If there's a shortage supply, housing does what?
it goes up.
Okay, so if all of a sudden you allow, and I'm throwing out a number, 1,000 rental units or purchased units downtown, that's 1,000 more units that's out there than what is today, prices will go down.
And we will have more affordable housing.
The way it's going with, we don't have any more land. Roy's not gonna all of a sudden put their hands together and all of a sudden poof, there's more land. Same with Wasatch Front. We are running out of land and prices are gonna skyrocket until we do something different.
just a question. And I understand that. I got a daughter right now that's looking for property. But that being said, how does that revitalize Roy? How does it revitalize Roy with 1,000 apartments along 1900 West?
that was a number he used.
I know, but that is also a projection that Randy Sant shared with me a couple of months ago.
Is that true?
I said that the plan, if you remember our conversation, was that when we were looking at the downtown master plan that we have not brought to the council because we put on hold, the plan said, when you put the plan together for the area, look at up to 1,000 residentials, but also 350 to 400,000 square foot of office an additional 150 to 200,000 square feet of commercial. That's the
So that would be the
proposal.
right revitalization part.
That would be the plan for the downtown. But I can almost tell you that you do not have developers. You will have maybe 2, 3 residential projects because of the land size and the restrictions there. Maybe 4 at the very most. And most of those will be on the east side of 1900.
So Randy, Steve, I'm sorry. How much of a rewrite would it take? How much of a rewrite would it take to make the setback far enough that we don't have it right on 1900?
Well, it would just be, like I said, a little caveat. It could say 60 feet with a little star next to it, refer to note number 5, and then 5 would say you can get up to 80 feet if it
Your
is
setback
that
is-
80 feet isn't within whatever that number happens to be from 1900 west.
Would that be
So
agreeable?
you could have a 60-foot building and then all of a sudden at 90 feet or whatever, it jumps up, or whatever that number is.
Because if you give them the ability to go 80, they're gonna go likely 80. And you, as a council, are gonna lose control of the project.
But if they have set it back far enough that we're okay with it, we haven't lost control. We've said that it has to be ground level commercial. And we've said that it can go higher so that to me, that's a compromise so that they can make the appropriate revenue that they need. So how far, I'm asking Steve, what would we have to do? And I think for me, he can get us there. What would you think of that, Diane?
I definitely think that if we're going to put that in, we definitely want a significant setback for the people,
And the setback could be as,
maybe 100 foot back.
if that leaves enough property to put a development and what can they put in that setback? Nothing?
Well, the way it's written, it's 10 foot and it would be buildings. So they would just have to decide how they want it, but they have to be at least 10 foot now. We haven't even discussed the other setback issue, but it'd have to be 10 foot to the road right now. That's the way it's written right now,
The property line.
to the property line. It has to be 10 foot.
Okay, how long do you think we will need to discuss this? Because we need to do it. I want to do it, or at least I think as Mayor Pro Tem, I think it's important to get this settled right away.
So.
I think our citizens are looking for that.
Mhm.
I think we as a council cannot move on until we do something with it, whether we agree to disagree or just agree. You want more, what more time? What do you want?
It sounds like, I think the height issue could be set because, personally, I think citizens prefer 60 foot across. But if that's not going to be the case, I think it needs to at least be a significant setback.
Okay, I can agree.
I think it needs to be a significant setback because I think that.
Significant,
I think it
again,
needs to be at least 100 foot.
Maybe just a clarification too, because we talked about the 100 feet away from 1900 west versus a setback, and they're going to be different. So if we're talking about 100 feet away from 1900 west, we would need to clarify that in the code.
Well,
Correct, Steve?
it's just that caveat that I could
Because the
put in.
setback would actually be from the property line.
Right.
so maybe if it's from,
1900 west.
maybe 100 foot back might be 20 feet of that might not be their property, so it might be a 60 foot.
Well, I think we gotta be careful because I think we could allow parking in shorter buildings in that 100 feet.
Correct, that's, when you're saying 100 feet setback, you're not going to allow the parking as well.
Yeah,
And that's quite a bit of
the
it.
term setback means you can't have anything
The
100 foot
building
back.
back.
But I think the building itself has to be 100 foot back a curb, but then you default to the rest of the code for
Couldn't I
everything
have,
else.
say the setback's 10 feet, couldn't I have a 60-foot building till 100 feet, then go up 20 more
Yeah.
20 more feet?
Right.
So we're not necessarily, It's just a distance from the, before you can have an 80-foot
Right.
building.
That's
If they
all I have.
choose,
You can wave your wand and make that happen.
yeah, if they
He said
choose,
he can put it in a caveat. Is
if
that
they
what you
choose
said?
the whole thing is 100 feet back before they have their building, yeah, it goes against the ordinance, but nothing says you can't. All setbacks.
So I mean,
are
you could do a
minimum
hotel
distance.
that's got an 80-foot tower and their lobby and conference centers out front,
Absolutely.
and then the towers in the back.
I think 100 feet is a reasonable, it gives you a distance back.
So,
Or it
So for
it pops up.
example, if you look at 5,400, that depth is, I think, like around 500 feet, 550 feet or something.
So
So
if we said 100 foot back for an 80-foot building, would that be?
Is that just in the east or the core
I
A?
don't think you allow
Nothing on the
well,
anything more
because
than.
on the west, we have 60 foot.
Yeah.
I don't think you'd want to do anything else, but on.
We've got 60 foot there. And the citizens, although they're sad, they would prefer 40 foot. At least that
But
would be a
like, who
balance.
knows if anybody will want
Only
anything 60
30%
foot.
say 40.
It might be 40
You're
foot.
from what most
32.
residential, 60 feet.
But 60,
But
on the
you know, what
west.
I'm saying is they still are gonna feel sad, but this at least gives, I think, a bit of a compromise that we're trying to listen to them and balance it.
do you think that will bring commercial, Brian?
As far as the east side, everybody wants to do stuff. So far as the west side, I mean, they're gonna have to take those lights down along that road.
I don't know.
Who knows
After,
who knows
after-
what they're gonna do there.
after
Feel
talking
bad for that car wash. I
with
mean, that
Clearfield
laundromat, just
this
remodel it
past
and
week,
so-
and their
They'll
former,
go west, because they don't want
engineer.
to property behind it and build another laundromat.
he was just of the opinion, no, don't touch it. It's not going as well in Clearfield as you think it is. It's a fad.
we're not
and it's a
Clearfield,
phase.
I just
No,
think
I
we got to
know,
do
I was-
something different than we've done.
I know. I
We need to
think,
move forward and
May I just
Make-
make
you
one?
know what?
what, Diane?
You,
I went and did a big search from Brigham to Layton. There are no 80-foot buildings that I can see that are off. I mean, there are none. And our little town they don't want to be the one with the sore thumb with the 80-foot. They want to be the one that doesn't have it. They don't want to be the Ogden or the Layton or the Salt Lake that has 80-foot. And so for us to now be suddenly the one that has the 80-foot, they're going to be very disappointed and sad because they like the other feeling. They like the townhome. So I did quite a bit of research in stretching that down that whole stretch, and I didn't see anything that was 80-foot. In fact, there hardly is anything 60-foot. Most of it's 40-foot.
I think that's what we'll get. But I know, but we have to create an environment that attracts if they want something different. We want something different. We can't want something different and not do something different. We've already had 60-foot in our code.
But not with mixed use. That's the difference, not with residential options. That's the whole key right here. That's the whole driving force for development.
Well, so I'm hearing one person say that they don't want anything but commercial.
Yeah, but you just said no one has come here because, and no one's been here because of 60-foot. No one's been here to do 60-foot, but that's because it was only zoned commercial for 60-foot. Our options and opportunities for having people come at 60-foot are much higher once you put residential as an option for that.
I just think we can agree if it's way off that we have done that. And Steve tells us he can do that by putting that very small caveat in there.
So can we do a work session before council meeting and he comes back with that caveat in there?
I'm fine with that.
Do it like the hour before, like 4:30.
Is there anything else you want?
Well, I
Addressed
think a
in
real
that.
brief thing to address would be the setback because 52% of people wanted the setback greater than 20, 48% want it 10, are okay with 10-foot. And if you're really going to try to balance that, then that would be a 15-foot setback. And that would be a nice balance that we could put in at the same time. So that's an
The
actual
balance
setback.
that we're asking for is a balance for an 80-foot, not,
That's different. That's a height. We're talking about actual building setback. Building setback from property line right now is 10-foot, but half of our people wanted it to be greater than 20-foot, because right now it's 20-foot, right, Steve? I believe. So half of our people wanted 20-foot. They want over 20 foot.
Setback can have nothing in it.
Exactly. And so I
Walkable sidewalk.
think that a nice, you could have, or you could have, if it's, if it's
So
a
are we okay
restaurant.
with that?
And so if we do 15, I think that's a very nice mix. It's a very nice balance. And then you can still have the restaurant,
15,
the
Brian.
people that have the restaurant, what do they call those little tables outdoors?
I
I
just,
like
I
the green
have,
space and the trees and the look of
15
that.
foot would be a nice compromise.
Right, I think so too.
And then
I'm okay with 15.
so can we put 15 foot?
Are you okay with
That's what that
15?
Okay, setback, is this from 1900 west or from
Yes.
property line?
Back, well,
Do
Back
it
of
instead of
curve.
10
Because
foot.
again, you've
Just
got
change
a
it from-
property line in between Arby's and Woodbury.
no,
On
I,
1900,
back of curb.
I think
No. I can't write back of curb.
Why?
Because that's gonna vary and it's gonna vary
it's gonna
as the
move.
road goes.
so
Okay,
wherever
so,
the 10
Because the
foot-
setback to me could be
1900?
the sidewalk.
No sidewalk's still in public right of way. Can't guarantee that.
Is
See, that's the
19,
thing we're looking at. 10 foot is back of property line. So you've got park strip, sidewalk, property line, and then 10 feet. That's already probably gonna be, what, 16 feet? That's,
If it's a 4.5 foot park strip and a 4 foot sidewalk, you're 9.5 feet before property line.
plus 10, then you're 20 feet before the building.
Right.
So were you looking at that when you're thinking setback?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yep.
Because if you go 15, now you're pushing into almost what, 30 feet?
And I think if you could just do it along 1900, it's fine. I think that the shorter 10 foot, well, actually, it's a lot shorter if it's not on
Well, 'cause the
1900. It's
property-
0 to
They
5.
go narrow the farther you go south.
Yeah, but I'm
so
just talking about
that's-
1900 because people
On the
really
east
want a
side,
little bit
it
of
just
space.
goes.
okay,
Mhm.
I don't know where, I don't know the direction to give Steve for the meeting before that.
Right now,
The only place I'd go 15 feet is Riverdale to 5600, but that carves out a whole different.
I think
I
that
wouldn't
sounds
do that
nice.
on south of 56 because you don't have enough room.
Okay,
No,
I'm
you
with
don't
you.
have
Let's
enough
do
room.
that.
It's
I
too
agree.
narrow.
How do you do a little caveat
Riverdale?
that?
50 foot.
what?
Riverdale to 5600,
With the 15-foot setback. But then on the south side of 5600, the building.
it would be the
land is
normal,
Too narrow to.
Normal as in
whatever, it's already written.
0 to 10?
Yeah, you would just put 10, you would put 15 foot instead of 0.
Why
you would
is
have-
that between Riverdale Road and 56 farther setback than 56 to 6000?
Because you
Oh,
have more
right now it's
space.
We have more space, but the required, the thought of having buildings on top of you isn't gonna diminish.
Very good point.
So why is one portion of this code
Well, to me,
less special than the rest?
Because what I'm looking at is if you would allow like an 80-foot hotel on the south side of 56, if you make them be 100-foot back and then you're another 15-foot back, you're pushing them to where the hotel's on the on-ramp. Be a nice jog to go around it. So that's why I was thinking 56 to Riverdale Road can have a little bit bigger setback because you have more property. As you get narrower, you're probably not gonna be able to cut that.
I mean, you're gonna have people are gonna request why that one's special and the others aren't.
Well,
I thought he just explained that.
No, I'm
because-
just, if I'm a developer and I'm saying, I see this one has a 15-foot setback, but everywhere else in the same zone is 10.
I would,
Why?
my vote would be to just leave it the way it is then.
I'm just giving you a different point of view.
No, I get it.
So, hey, Ryan, so do you
Makes more
don't
sense
want
the
no
narrower you get.
residential downtown at all?
No,
Just only commercial?
yes.
there have been some suggestions for
And
4A and 4B.
I think we could do that.
I'm probably not gonna agree with that. Just-
I can't
just
see enough
FYI.
commercial to fill that. I can't, there's just not commercial right now. I
We're
just,
we're not
No,
having it
it's-
come.
yeah.
It's hard. You have to call.
You're not
and
building
call.
sit-down restaurants now.
I don't think the
Number one.
call is helping. I just don't think it's.
We don't have a plan. We can call every business in the world and beg them to come to Roy. We don't have a plan. We don't have anything to offer.
Right, Steve.
Well, again, I don't want to dominate the conversation or, because Jen wants me just to be a resource. There is one property that is for sale. It has a single family home that's been vacant for forever. I have nothing but conversations with developers asking, can that just be residential only? And every time I say, no, it's gonna have commercial on the first floor, you know what they do? Thanks anyway.
Yeah.
They're not looking to just to have empty space on those type of properties.
But once you give up that, once.
That's a
you-
single family home right now.
No, and I understand that, but we're looking out, I would think, into the future, a great distance, and once these pieces are taken from us, they're gone. It's like, I think I've told Diane this, it's like forest land. You lose a forest, they come in and pave it, and then there's nobody to come back and tear that up and replant the trees. And my point is that I just, and I hear how badly we're doing at economic development, but actually we're doing better than most cities and did have a gain. And so.
Did we have a gain from within our city or because our population brings us more money?
No, it was.
I would ask you to clarify that.
Go ahead.
Was the money generated within the city or was it generated because our population gives us more?
You would have to look at both of them because 2/3 come from population. So the
That's
greatest
my point.
portion is from
But
population.
sales
The
tax,
sales tax in Utah in general has been inclining over the last year.
We have 4 grocery stores.
We get a higher
That's
percentage
what
of
we
sales
get.
tax because of our population. So people are going down to Riverdale spending their money. We're getting a bigger portion of that because we have a higher population than Riverdale does.
Yeah, we have
No,
4
no,
grocery stores. That's where our taxes is coming from.
And that's correct too. A lot of the grocery stores have been doing very well during the
Please.
pandemic.
Again, I know I sent an email out December 1st. You do still have over 1,000 acres of commercial only land in the city, even if this regional commercial goes 100% residential. So you're not losing a lot of land.
This cannot go 100%
I'm just saying,
residential though.
You
It
still
could.
have a lot
No,
of,
it couldn't.
No.
you still have a lot of portions of the city that are commercial only.
Because we said no ground level residential in
yeah,
any of
but
this
it could
district.
go. The majority of it certainly could go residential.
Mixed use residential. It's mandating ground floor commercial.
That to me is preserving some, I think that's a compromise. I
I
mean,
think so too.
so, okay, we can call for a meeting before
I gotta leave in a few minutes.
I've got to leave too. And I
So-
said we would.
So
Okay, so what I
4:30.
So what I hear is, we're going to write it, I'd just like to summarize, we're gonna write it for 100-foot back, for 80-foot high, and then we're going to change along 1900 to 15-foot setback. Is that what we understand?
That's
We
what I.
just did, that's what I understand we've decided.
I wouldn't vote for all of 1900 to be 15 foot because you get down south and you limit those property owners. They have
Okay,
Yeah, the
limits.
farther
So-
south you go, the land shrinks.
You
So,
look at the liquor store, I mean, they're in the narrowest part and there's developable land between there and Les Schwab that if you push them back too far, they're not gonna be able to build anything.
All right, well then the compromise is what you originally suggested, Joe, because that's
So
the
can it,
rest of that.
I'm not saying, I'm just saying I won't go for 1500. There's 4 other votes here. Or 15 foot on 1900. I would do a portion of it, but that's it.
so can it be only a portion?
Well, I mean, if we say all of core A, yes, but only portion of core A, no.
Okay, so if we said all of Core A goes to Les Schwab, is that too far in your mind, Joe?
I think once you go past, because you still have the railroad track now, once you go past 5,600, you've got a problem. And that's where we anticipate a hotel, that's where we anticipate an office building with the ability to still have some restaurants around it.
They're still building that mountain, that credit union right there.
But the setback is different than,
It is, but you can't have anything in the setback. That is just,
That's what the citizens want the look of. That's where the look comes in. That's where the prettiness, or if you have a restaurant, you can have your little tables outside on that area.
I could only see that
Right?
56 to
That's my
River.
understanding.
If he doesn't think we can write it separate, then
Because I think core A would be a perfect place for that setback to be that way.
but it can't go that far on core A and have still development property. That's what Steve is
You
telling.
can,
Yeah, you
it's,
can.
it's gonna be small and they'll have to incorporate, but
I mean, 5
I
foot,
wouldn't,
what is-
I wouldn't split a zone having
Okay.
south of 56 is one thing and north of 56 is another. You might find yourself in the ombudsman's office, the property owner taking the city to court, basically.
So this is about 5 foot, right? Isn't this about 5 foot?
So Joe,
probably 15.
the point of it would be, if we could go that, it would still be up to the property owner whether they wanted to do that or not. If we said 15.
But what if we changed it, then the property owner came in and needed and wanted us to change the setback?
They'd have to go back to the planning commission to make an ordinance change.
And
Because it
maybe we,
depends on the
maybe we
business.
go with 15 and then a developer says,
Right.
you've hardshiped us too much
Right.
on that side. We've got to have that extra 5 feet, then we can relook.
Then we start looking at,
That's what I
relooking
was
at.
thinking, that we should
So
just
those
say
two things to
15
me,
and then.
I mean, if that
depending
gets
on-
us, if that gets us on down the
Right,
road.
and if
We
that-
gotta get on
right,
down the
and then if
road.
it depends on the developer, we can go in and go dingle the planning commission and.
I think we've come up with an okay thing on setback. We've come up with an okay thing on height. And it sounds to me like we're gonna agree to disagree on commercial only.
Right.
So are we gonna have a work session for you to show us the document prior to the council meeting? Okay.
Can you do that, Steve?
Don't call me. You're right.
You want me to buy you lunch? What do you want?
Yeah.
I have a Grubhub certificate. I'll just
I
have it delivered to
appreciate you
your door.
working, and
Tomorrow's
I know
Taco
we went a
Tuesday.
half hour over, but we're still way under what we've usually gone over, and I think we've accomplished a lot. Brian, I think I appreciate that we've all worked to just agree to disagree when we don't. So, thank you.
Dan,
Yes.
I'll need a motion to.
Oh.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
City Hall.
Thank you.
My daughter
Diane
goes to his iPad to take the test.
Okay, wait a minute. We have to do a roll call.
No, you don't have to do a roll.
Oh,
call,
okay.
just Make sure that everyone agrees to the motion.
Yeah.
Okay, there's been a motion, there's been a second,
All in favor?
all in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My daughter.